So this one is the most updated version. I already sent it to Ryan for approval. So we're just gonna go ahead and work off of this one because this is the most updated and it has more steps and it's a little more detailed than the previous one. So the purpose of this procedure is to provide for implementation of policy and assigning responsibilities for calibration of monitoring and measuring devices in order to establish a standard method for controlling, calibrating, and documenting maintenance of inspection, measuring, and test equipment. So let's go ahead and scroll down here. So general calibration. So the appropriate devices, instrumentation, and/or tools are calibrated per applicable ANSI/NCSL Z540-1 or ANSI ISO IEC 17025 standards. So pretty much what this is saying is that all of the items have to be calibrated by these two standards. What are these two standards? So when you see the certificates, they should all say that they're all per this standard. So calibration is performed per calibration system log. Calibration status shall be positively identified on all appropriate equipment. Uncalibrated items shall be positively identified as reference only or indication only. Items that cannot be calibrated shall be identified as unserviceable, which I don't think we have any that are like that, so we don't need to worry about that one right now. If calibration of the equipment is not considered to meet the acceptance criteria, notify Director of Quality Assurance for appropriate analysis and disposition of the equipment. Calibration equipment that has any limitation is to be labeled with a limitation. In the event that material was accepted using equipment out of tolerance, equipment that exceeds the manufacturer's suggested tolerances, the customer must be notified in writing and the material returned for re-inspection. A root cause and corrective action must be generated per the procedures in SOP 8502, which we don't really have to worry about that either because we don't have any equipment like that at the moment. For internal calibration, for internal calibrations, labels attached to the equipment certifications will indicate the standards used and their calibration dates. So that was like what I just said. The certificate says this standard on it. Has to say that. So we know that it was actually calibrated per those standards. Calibration standards are to be evaluated in a controlled environment, internal and outside labs. So, well, this all has information that we're gonna, go over as we go through this, because all of that's in the log. So creating the stock number. So access calibration log, sort column by stock number and find the highest number. Use next sequential number to create the new stock number. Enter all relevant information for the equipment. I'm just gonna go over this quickly and then I'm gonna go over to the log and just pretty much go over all of this again. So stock number, equipment name, calibration date, calibration interval, months depending on the type, model, historical, and other information. Establish a calibration interval for each inspection, measuring, and test equipment. Document and record the calibration interval for each inspection, measuring, and test equipment requiring calibration. So the calibration interval just means every how often it's going to be calibrated. So for most of these, they're all just 24 months, which means 2 years. So every 2 years, these items have to be recalibrated again. So, and then due next calibration due date. And then it says, note, do not modify this cell. This will change automatically based on the calibration date and calibration interval. And this means for the due date. It automatically populates on its own once you enter the new date that the item was calibrated. So let me just pull up the calibration one so I can show you guys. So back to this part for creating the stock number. So what that means, it's telling you to kind of fix it up so that it lists all the numbers like in numerical order. So let me just zoom out. So the only thing with this one is it's a little bit not hard or too confusing. You just got to remember to check these numbers as well as the Guatemala ones, because when we put a new number, like to see what the new stock number is going to be for the next item, sometimes that item is for Guatemala only. So that means that some of the numbers are going to be over here. So just when you're doing it, let me just zoom in so you can see a little bit better. You go to over here, stock number, and you right click on it, and you put sort A to Z. So then it's going to start with the lowest number on top and the biggest one at the bottom. So you could kind of keep going, you know, on track with the one with 08 if you want. So the next one would be 0825. But then first, if you want to use that number, you got to make sure you go to the Guatemala one, make sure that it's not being used here. So this one, I don't think you can, it doesn't have the option to, you know, put it in numeric order, but there's a little bit so you can see with your eye, like, okay, there's no 0825. So then you could use that number. Or you can just keep going. I don't know, it gets a little bit weird because these ones were already done before I got here. So I don't know how they chose those numerical numbers, but you can kind of just choose to go with whichever kind of sequential numbers go here, because you see how it's 06, and then it goes from 35 all the way to 50, and then it jumps to 65. So yeah, it gets a little bit weird, so you can kind of just keep going from this one, 0825, or you can go from 1174, just as long as it's not a number that's being used.
Okay.
So like for this one though, the digital force meter, I chose C0215 because I had asked Ryan before how one of the numbers was like chosen, and it was already like on the part itself. So like it already had a sticker on there that had a number on it.
Oh, okay.
So that I didn't have to create a whole new number or anything like that. I just went ahead and I used that number because these ones are not like anything like the ones that we use. See C0215, that's not like any of the numbers that we use. So pretty much you just gotta make sure that you don't
like
reuse a number,
or
yeah.
something like that.
And then the thing is over here in this middle one, so the active one, these are for us only. The Guatemala tab over here, these are all the items that are in Guatemala. So you don't have to worry or keep track of their items to be calibrated. They'll send them over to us when they see that they notice that they're ready to be calibrated.
Okay.
Oh, and what it was saying also, when you're like creating the new number, you fill in all this information. It's pretty easy. When you like look at the part, you can see like for this one, I can see that the brand or the manufacturer is Dixon. So this one's 0738. Let's look at it right here. So see, the manufacturer is Dixon, and it says it right here, Dixon. And then I think it says the type or whatever on here somewhere. And then it says the model. And you could actually see the model right here. It's kind of actually cut off a little bit. But it used to show it right here. It had like the model number.
Okay. I'm just looking at the
So that's just how you find the information.
We're getting the due dates in red right now, so like
yeah, it's because with the whole COVID thing,
yeah.
they didn't want to come here to do it, and some of these items are really big.
Okay, got it.
We'll get more through the whole process, and you'll get a little more information as we go.
Okay.
I just wanted to show you guys that part. So then, like I said, like the manufacturer, the model type, and then the class. So the class determines the method of calibration for the equipment. So class A is when it's being calibrated outside, like in an outside lab, like for AmCal, which they're actually not anymore our calibration lab that we're going to be using, but or class B, the calibration performed either by an outside lab or internally. And then class C, equipment that is identified as indication only. And then location and comments. So the whole class thing, sorry, is right here. Let's see over. So class, so pretty much what it's saying that on these two, on the active tab and the Guatemala tab, the class will always be A or B.
Okay. Class
C will only be for indication only. So these ones should all be marked as class C over here. Over. And then we have like the location means where that item is right now. So like for the Guatemala tab, they will all say Guatemala because they're in Guatemala. And then in the active tab, we have here where they're at. So Torrance, this is probably Yolanda's caliper or something like that. Yeah, that's her caliper. Torrance QA means that it's with Lorenzo. Lorenzo knows where it's at because he has it like in different places, sometimes being used for CSI and stuff like that. And then Torrance testing, that means that it's going to be in that room right over there that Van's always in. And then there's just other like little notes. Some of these items do go back and forth from Guatemala to here. So that's why it's still in our log. So like currently right now I can see that this one is over there. So the hygrometer 0820, that one's in Guatemala right now. So we have to keep track of this one even though it's in Guatemala because it's in our active tab. So once we see that it's upcoming for calibration, we have to send them an email to let them know to ship it back, which it'll say right here in the procedure. So updating the calibration logs. The calibration system log shall be checked monthly. So add a reminder on your Google Calendar to update calibration log every month. So pretty much every first of the month, you just go into here and you check it. And then you put on here, so like upcoming for next month.
Actually, you just update the dates every month.
Yeah, I had already gone through this one a few times, honestly. Yeah. I just haven't updated the month because it's been going back and forth on some of the items. Because I already sent it for a quote a long time ago. Okay. So we're just like trying to find what calibration lab we're gonna use and stuff. But so like for next month, you're gonna put 7/1 right here. 7/1/20, and then the next check date it populates itself. But I mean, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't give you any notification or anything. That's why you need to put it in your Google Calendar to check it.
Okay, we'll just sync it up in our calendars.
Usually, I didn't really have to, because
like,
I don't know. It's something that I know. It's like calibration log for sure. Like it's something easy because it's like every beginning of the month. But if you're just starting, you want to make sure you put it on your calibration log so you know.
Sure.
If any piece of equipment is due for calibration within the following 2 months, the equipment shall be promptly scheduled for calibration. So let's look at it. Oh, I accidentally exited out of it. So let's look at it right now. So we're in June. So these ones are coming up for July. Let me just send those again. Wait, hold on. I think these are done here. Yeah. No, some of them are calibrated by then. So we actually need to do that. It's been kind of messed up because we've been trying to find a lab, so these ones are going to be kind of messed up a little bit. So we should be all good by this month. I actually have to send her an email. So it's just saying that the next 2 months. So let's say today's June. So if there's any that are due, like not July, like August. Yeah, in August or like anything before that, you would send them an email on that. Even though it's all the way out till August, just so that we can have the quote ready and have everything ready.
Sure.
Everything prepared. Yeah. Let's see. And then this is just a note. I only had to deal with this once, and I didn't notice that it was on the procedure, so I went ahead and I added it. So it says the golden keys are going to be calibrated by the testing engineer. So you'll get it from Guatemala, and it'll just say golden keys on it. And once you know that those are the golden keys, you just go ahead and you give them to Van, and he'll test them. He'll calibrate them, whatever he needs to do on that. Okay, so check to see first if we have all the items due for calibration in Torrance or in Guatemala. You gotta walk around the building, warehouse, and confirm where those items are and make sure that they're here. You're gonna cross-reference the due dates from the calibration log and the label that's on the item. And if they don't match, check the certificate. So what that's saying is, I personally, when I see which items are before I send the request for a quote to Jessica, I print out the sheet of the ones that are going to be due for calibration. I kind of cut and paste the ones that I need onto a new one because you want to make sure you don't mess this log up because this is the only copy.
Okay.
So I go ahead and I print it and I put the ones that I need on here. I print the whole thing. So then I walk around the building and I check them off and make sure like where they're at. And like if I can't find any, I ask around and try to find it. Or I send
Sorry to interrupt. Are you guys gonna count?
Are we what?
There's stuff to count. They're telling me so.
Oh yeah, I had told them if they can ask you and Wilmer to do it because we're training. So then I check and I make sure that all the items are here because sometimes, like you can forget or because since it goes back and forth from Guatemala to here, sometimes I personally do forget like to change it. But I'm trying to be the best that I can and mark when they go to Guatemala.
Okay.
So you just want to make sure you go back in here, and once you know that they're going to be sent back to Guatemala, you go ahead and you mark on here Guatemala. or if they're sent back, you want to put Torrance on here. Because there's a lot of back and forth on there, and sometimes they kind of don't let me know. Like sometimes the items will be with Lorenzo because he needed them, so he asked them. So that's why sometimes it's not marked that it's in back here. We'll think that it's in Guatemala. But yeah, you can just walk around and ask. And even if it says Guatemala, like just make sure like, hey, I want to make sure this item's not here. And if Lorenzo says he doesn't have it, then you can go ahead and you send an email to Guatemala and say, hey, this item is due for calibration. Can you ship it back to us? But you want to make sure you give yourself enough time. That's why it's, we ask for the quote 2 months ahead, because then we'll have those items already here once they're ready to ship out. Yeah, because it takes a while for them to be sent from Guatemala sometimes. Sometimes they'll send it through DHL, and sometimes they have to send it through Marisol. And if they send it through Marisol, it takes, I believe, like months, they were telling me, for it to get here.
Okay,
so you just got to make sure that you request it from them. And that's why I added this stuff here, because before it didn't say anything of that. And there was kind of like a lot of running around and a lot of last minute things and stuff like that. So I try to, update this so that doesn't happen anymore. So you update the location listed on the log after receiving confirmation. If it's in Guatemala, you put Guatemala on there. That's what that's saying. If calibration is external, notify the purchasing manager via email that a quote is needed for calibration. Also include if the item will be calibrated on-site or off-site. So that tells you right here in the comments. So if they're to be calibrated here on-site, like this one, calibration done here on-site, or if it just says like that, just calibrated around, how does it say anything about on-site, then you go ahead and you tell her that it's going to be, sent out. She just needs to know when it's being done here, because there's different pricing for that. So when you're requesting the quote, have the purchasing manager confirm with the lab if they have any limited capabilities for the items listed for calibration. If they have any limited capabilities, inform the testing engineer and confirm if it's acceptable for the equipment to be calibrated within the range. So pretty much what this is saying is, so let me just show you an example. So for AmCal, we're not using AmCal anymore, by the way, but before for AmCal, they told us that the highest reading that they could do for on-site was 20 megahertz. But now we're using a new lab, and I'm not really sure what capabilities they have, if they have any. But that's why we want to confirm, because if they have any limited capabilities, then that means that one of our items may or may not be calibrated here on site. They might have to be sent out. But it just depends. So then if they do have any limited capabilities for doing it on site, then you need to confirm with BAN if it's acceptable to be calibrated within that range. If items are located in Guatemala, send a request to have equipment shipped back to the Torrance office as soon as possible. Like I was saying, because it takes time for them to get here. After management approves the quote, which is Ryan, he has to approve the quotes, the purchasing manager, Jessica, will schedule a date and time for the calibration, whether it's on-site or off-site. Once the purchasing manager receives a date and time, they will notify the QA rep. If items are to be calibrated here on-site, notify any personnel it would affect. Mostly it just affects Van and Lorenzo. So you have to let them know when they're going to be coming for calibration. If items are to be shipped out for calibration, the purchasing manager shall hand the PO to the QA rep, except if the calibration lab is coming to do on-site calibration. They can hand carry the additional items to be calibrated with them. Oh, I think I messed up on this section. Hand PO to the QA rep, except if calibration lab is coming to do on-site. Oh, okay. I didn't mess up. So I'll rephrase it after. So except if calibration lab is coming to do on-site calibration, they can hand carry the additional items to be calibrated with them. They do not need to be wrapped, just put in a box for easy transportation. The QA rep will then hand the PO to shipping and let them know what its items need to be shipped. So pretty much what this one is saying, because it kind of correlates with this one, is saying that if it's being calibrated here on site, then the person that's going to come do the on-site calibration, he'll be able to take the rest of the items that don't need to be calibrated here on site. He can take it with him, but he doesn't need it to be like, perfectly wrapped up in a box. You just kind of not throw it in there, but you kind of package him a little bit and you just give it to him and he'll take it. But if it's being shipped out, that's when you have to give the PO to Anthony and make sure it's wrapped up and you ship it out regular. So here we go. Updating the certificate. So after the calibration is completed, the company shall receive a calibration certificate via email. You're gonna print the certificate, and then you're gonna open the calibration certification folder in the server. So it's ODrive, Document Center, calibration records, and then calibration certificates. We're gonna do one as an example in a second here. So cut the old file and paste into history folder. You're gonna copy the old file name, and then on that old file, you're gonna add in the year that one expired, okay? And then the due date year to the name of the old file. Save the new certificate to the server in the calibration certificate folder with the old file name. So pretty much the only difference is the old file is gonna have the exact same name, but it's gonna have the year that it expired on it. So if it expired this year, just have the same information and then 2020 at the end. And then the new certificate, and then that one will be in the history folder. And then the new certificate will be just in the regular calibration certificate folder with the same name. It just won't have the year on it.
Okay, so just update the dates. Alright.
Yeah, we'll look at it right now and it'll be a little easier. So open calibration log and ensure it is sorted by due date, and then search for the appropriate stock number of certificate being worked on. Change the last calibration date in log with the new calibration date on the certificate. Update the last updated date in the log with current date, and then you're gonna click save. And then the hard copy, you give it to Lorenzo. So let's just pretend that they sent us a certificate, right? And the certificate they sent us was for, let's see the old one that we did. Let's see one of the most recent ones. So let's see, moisture chamber, 0808. So we're gonna go here, this is just, let me start over. So ODrive, Document Center, calibration records, calibration certificates. So these ones are all the new ones, these are the ones that should be up to date. And then if you wanna find it, you can either go, keep scrolling and put till you find it, there's one, or you can go here and just search by the stock number, 0808. So when you do that though, it pulls up all of them. It pulls it from the history and from the new one. So you know that this one right here, see it says 2020, that's the old one and this is the new one. So if this was the old one, let's say that this is the old one, right? And we got a new certificate. So then what you do is you cut this one. You can either right click and put cut, or you can simply put Control X, which is my favorite to use. Control X, go all the way up, go to history, and then you put it here and you paste it. So then you copy this name right here, because that's what your new file is going to be called. And then you just put the year that it expired. So we're pretending that it just expired this year, right?
Yeah.
So 2020. It's not gonna let me save it because there's already one. See? But that's what you would do. And then on the new one, you would just change it and it'll be the exact same name. Pretty easy there. So then once you do all that, you save it in there, you come into here and you check the calibration date. And you want to put the calibration date that is showing on the actual certificate. You don't just put the date that you received the certificate. You put the one that's on the certificate. So for this one, they would have put, or I would have put. Just search it again. So it says here. You want to just be careful because some of them are a little bit different. Some of them will have the information over here at the top. Some of them it'll be in the middle. Some of them will be at the bottom like this one. So this one was calibrated on 2/10/20 and it expires on 2/10/2022. So 2/10/20, you would just change the calibration date here from 2/10/20 and then that's it because this one will automatically populate itself. And then once you finish updating that, you just click save and you can exit and then you go and you give the printed copy that you just printed and you give it to Lorenzo and that's it. That's pretty easy. Let's see. Outside services. If the inspection, measuring, or test equipment requires calibration by an outside supplier, ensure all calibration documents are returned after calibration, including raw analytical data and certification reports. How to service. If the inspection, measuring, or test equipment is dropped, damaged, broken, broken, tamper-resistant seal, or otherwise determined unfit for use, immediately remove from service and promptly identify as out of service. Notify Director of Quality Assurance for appropriate disposition of the equipment. And then all equipment that is taken out of service that is functional shall be checked for calibration to determine that the equipment was within specified requirements during the calibration cycle it was last used. Any questions on that part? No? Okay. Control of jigs and fixtures. Jigs and fixtures shall be inspected with shop gauges prior to use or when first used by either or both. Inspection of the jig or fixture itself. Inspection of parts made or assembled by the jig or fixture. Jigs and fixtures shall be recalibrated, repaired, or scrapped when inspection of the jig or fixture or of the parts made or assembled indicates deviation from the requirements. Any questions on that? No? Okay. Indication only. Certain types of equipment shall be identified as indication only because of their passive nature. These will still be given a stock number and recorded in the calibrated system log under the tab INDC-NIS, which means indication or not in service. Let's see, adjustable equipment. Equipment needed adjustments will use tamper-proof seals to prevent tampering of said adjustments. Software. Coast ACM has no plans for software controlled testing, disposition, some information here, and then records, some other information here, not really with what we're doing. So I actually do have one as an example here that we're gonna do that is actually being changed to indication only. So this one is stock number 0738. So we're just gonna look for 0738, which is right here, 0738. So all we're gonna do is just copy that. And go over here, we'll paste it at the bottom, and then we're just gonna change some of the information here. So this one should now be changed to C. To C, and then that's it. We're gonna go back to the other one, and we're just gonna delete it from here. So delete. And click. Oh, I gotta put this now. Okay, 6-23. Oh wait, just kidding. Okay, so these ones you guys don't have to actually worry about. I just remembered. I just sent all of these ones right here. I sent them to Jessica already to get calibrated. So we're just waiting on the approval for the PO. So then we click exit. So then Ryan told me that he actually wanted us to take off this sticker here. Okay. So if you guys see, this is the regular sticker.
Yeah.
So it has the asset number, who was calibrated by, the certificate number, so that's how you can find it as well.
Okay, good.
Like confirm it, yeah. And then the date that it was calibrated, and then the date that it's due for calibration.
Sure.
See it? So the stock number right there, and this one was calibrated by Amcal Labs. The date that it was calibrated and the due date. So this information should match the log and the hard copy of the certificate. So if you ever see some information is not right, it's most likely the label.
And who
that
fills
would
out
be
the
wrong.
certificate of information usually?
So if it's calibrated out with an outside lab, it'll be that.
Sure.
So I think right now, the one that we're gonna be using from now on, I think it was called US Calibration. I'm not sure if that's the one that they're gonna keep on using or not.
Yeah.
But that's the one that we went with this last time. So we're just gonna remove this sticker per Ryan's instructions. Just gonna remove that. And then we're gonna put this indication sticker on here.
Okay, so we're putting
I'm not really sure where
the
this is.
new yellow sticker on it now? Or, yeah, on the side probably.
Yeah, I think on the side. Which I actually have to get some more tape, but these ones actually don't really stick all that well.
It's okay, as long as it's on there, you know.
No,
Right?
it'll come off.
Really?
Yeah, I told Brian, I asked him like, oh, if there was some more stickers. I don't know
why
why I didn't think of it, but he was like, just put tape over it.
Like
So just put the sticker on it and then just put some tape over it because it will lift off.
Sure. So
I already did it twice on some other machines and it just kept lifting off.
Alright, we'll just scotch tape over.
Yeah, and it's just to make sure, you know, that we know that it's indication only because there was one and that's how I kind of found out that it was because the sticker came off. because it should have been marked as indication only, and it was. It's just that the sticker came off, so it seemed
Yeah,
like it
okay.
wasn't.
So those happen. Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I know that it's gonna come off. So I need to put some tape on there. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Any questions? No, pretty easy. Okay.
I'm gonna stop the